Buddy, this is Brian Emhauser here with you for Real Hawk Talk. Whoa, hold on. I want to make sure this actually went live. We got a new live streaming going on with YouTube and trying to make sure we're working. I think we are. All right, so let's try that again. Welcome everybody. This is Brian Nemhauser and at Hawkblogger on Twitter. And we're here for what is the 77th episode of Real Hawk Talk. We've got the full crew tonight. At Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter is back in Toronto after a fun, productive, but unfortunate trip to the Northwest to watch the Seahawks lose to the Ravens and to get some Matador nachos. Have you been able to get either one of those things out of your head since you came out here, Jeff?
The game much more than the nachos. I still have not had as much steak and on a pile of nachos since Evan turned out to be right. I haven't tested it out.
Oh, did we cover this? Because
I think we did. I don't think we did.
Actually, Nathan had some good counterpoints. Actually,
so I don't. Yeah, we can get into this now. So, Evan, why don't you restate your theory here?
My theory, which has been proven true by a large data sample size, is that if you ask for the toppings outside of beans, cheese, steak, outside of those three toppings, you ask for all the other toppings on the side, doesn't matter if you're gonna eat them or not, you are mentally manipulating the chef into adding more chips and more steak and more cheese. Because what happens is they build this plate of nachos and then there's no toppings on it or very few toppings on it. And they're like, oh, this looks pathetic. I can't push this out of the kitchen. The customer's going to be upset. And what ends up happening is they throw more cheese, more chips, and more steak on it. So you end up getting a better bang for your buck. Okay, that is my hypothesis.
Hold on, is that everywhere or just at Matador?
Oh, this is exclusively to Matador.
Okay.
So I think that there's three things to look for: more chips, more cheese, more steak. So Jeff was in town, and we all got together except for Evan because he was still in Phoenix to test this out at Matador. We ordered just regular nachos and then Evan style nachos. And when they came, the Evan style nachos clearly had more steak, even though it was kind of hard to tell because the regular nachos had the guac and the pico and everything else on top, so you couldn't really see all of the steak. It felt very clear that the Evan style nachos had more steak, but or cheese. I don't think we saw any evidence of that, and neither with chips. Cheese, chips, the same, clearly more steak.
I like what you did there.
What did I do?
You got him to go into his Evan overconfidence to where I feel like victory lap, and he went, instead of just actually sticking to what actually is different, he went over his skis as he often does.
I think he's
talking about chips and cheese and all this other stuff, of which there absolutely was not more of that.
Well, and I think Evan has consistently said chips and cheese. So
he has. I think he has.
So was I right?
Well, so on steak, yes. So here's the other thing: the toppings came on the side, and if you go to a Mexican restaurant and you get the salsa and the little white dish, came in like that. So that was all fine. So everyone was still hungry. Ordered another round of nachos, another nacho. And of course, since we had gotten more steak, we decided to do the Evan style again because we felt at that point confident that Evan was actually right, at least in terms of steak, which is the best part of this. So the second Evan style nachos come, and they do not have more chips, and they do not have more cheese, and they do not have more steak. Also, the toppings, instead of coming in the bigger, whatever size white dish that you get normally salsa and whatever in, came in the little metal tins that you get salad dressing on the side. And so not only did the second set of Evan nachos not have more of the stuff that he had theorized they would have, we also kind of got screwed on the sauce or the sides, except for
Brian. You know why that happened?
To just ask for more. So
you know why that happened? The chef found out what you were doing. He mentally realized the trick you were pulling on him.
mental
And-
jujitsu does
I
back.
thought you said you had done this time and again, and there was no
But
variation.
I've never ordered more than one full plate of nachos.
Now, don't lie. Evan.
If
Don't
you
lie.
order repeat bowls of, or plates of nachos, of course the mentally manipulated chef is going to figure out what's going on. This is a one-time trick per visit.
I think the conclusion here is that Matador has some quality control issues on their food, and you may be able to use it to your advantage to get some extra steak sometimes.
It is worth, I would definitely say it is worth that folks try it once, when they go to Matador next. Order all toppings on the side. The second time we ordered, it came with the guac on top, even though we said all toppings on the side. So I think Nathan's point is valid that at the very least, there's no consistency to how they prepare their nachos. So, it's worth a shot. Definitely got more steak on the nachos that Jeff ordered. I was very shocked that happened. So I do want to give you credit, Evan. You were right on probably
As I often am.
as you almost never are, but that on a very the most important topping being the steak, you got extra. I cannot believe that they managed to give us extra steak. It's the most expensive, best part of that plate, and you're right. So about at least part of it. Those two, if you don't know who they are, that was at Evan Hill, SEA on Twitter, and at Nathan E11, Nathan Ernst, filling you in on all the nacho goodness. I know from the chat that everybody loves it when we spend half of our show talking about nachos. Like, there's no doubt people really, really like nacho talk. I gotta say, it's not going to change. This is going to be a key part of conversations going forward. So, we got a ton to go over tonight, guys. It's kind of a fascinating couple of weeks. We missed last week. Was sorry to do that. Didn't really get to have a Ravens fallout conversation. Didn't get to preview the Falcons game. And then we had this crazy Falcons game where we went out 24-0 the first half, looked as good as we've looked, and gave up 20 points in the second half and had a ball game against a bad team. Since then, we've got Tedric Thompson going on IR today. Got to talk about that. Marquise Blair emerging in the backfield, and we're going to have what looks to be the first new pairing at the safety position without Tedric Thompson. We've got Justin Britt put on IR, and we've got Ed Dixon coming back. We've got little Joey Hunt at center. There is a lot to cover. So what I want to start with is, what I'm seeing across Seahawks fans, I'm not sure if you guys are seeing this as well, is this crazy divide that especially happened after the Falcons game, which was you got the two halves where people are like, okay, this team's really good, and then this team's really bad, and you've got fans that are kind of split of, look, this team is 6-2. They are as good as any Seahawks team has been, through 8 games pretty much, other than maybe I think 1. They're a contender. They're for real. And people are being too critical of all the things that are holding them back. You got another crew that sees the Seahawks as complete posers, that this is a total mirage. The 6-2 is product of a lot of other things, and they just aren't that excited about this team. And I think in the meantime, you've got a 49ers team that's looming that everyone knows is coming the game after this week. And people are wondering, are the Seahawks, do they really have a chance in this division? It's a weird question to ask for a team that's 6-2. So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna play a little game here, and we're gonna start by taking both sides of that debate. We're gonna start with one side, and we're gonna switch to the other, and we're gonna see how far we can go in convincing ourselves of which is the truer argument here about the Seahawks. So let's start by taking the positive. If you guys were in charge of making the case for the Seahawks being a contender, not talk about just for the division, but a contender for the Super Bowl, that this is a legitimate Super Bowl contending team this year, where would you start? What are the signs? What are the evidence that you'd point to say this team can be a contender for the trophy? And why don't we start with you, Jeff?
I feel like all three of us or all four of us will probably have the same answer here, but I think the obvious one here, and it's probably the number one reason the Seahawks are 6-2, is Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson is playing at the highest level he has in his career. I think higher than the 2015 that stretch he had in that 8-game stretch there. I think Russell's been maybe the most valuable player in the whole league based on what's around him. I think there's a pretty good case because you saw when he didn't play well in that Baltimore game, how little there was around him. And I think Russell's this first half has been just outstanding. He's had a quarterback rating, I believe, above 100 in every game. I think there's a better case for him than Rodgers, than for Mahomes, and for Watson. And I think really the Seahawks offense is kind of a three-headed monster right now. It's Wilson's been playing the best football of his career. Tyler Lockett's had a phenomenal season. Their chemistry is through the roof. Lockett's, a lot of people wondered how he'd do without Doug around. He's stepped up his game even further. He's having the best season of his career. And I know their running game isn't the most efficient thing at all. It's probably not efficient as a whole, mostly due to the run blocking. But Chris Carson has really turned his season around. And he's been a really big factor in terms of like the advanced metrics, in terms of breaking tackles, in terms of yards before or yards after contact. So really that three-headed monster is really the only reason. And it's mostly the quarterback. I know we don't like to pin it all on one player, but really the reason they're 6-2 and the reason for optimism is simply put, it's Russell.
Evan or Nathan, let's start with you, Evan. Russell's the obvious, I think we all see that, and he's clearly having an MVP caliber season. What are the things about this team that you believe, it doesn't have to be that they're contenders right now, but you believe that there's signs that this team could grow into that over the course of the season? What are some other reasons that you see to potentially be optimistic about where this team can grow?
Yeah, I actually immediately jumped to the defensive side of the ball. Two specific areas. Tedric Thompson is somebody that we've been complaining about for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, saying, why the heck is he starting? We think we think Delano Hill is better. We think Marquise Blair is better right now. Why is Tedric getting so many reps? It felt like every single week he was making it felt like every week he was giving up 1 to 2 major plays, making major miscalculations in how he was timing the ball for interceptions, pass breakups, that sort of things. We all have those visuals stuck in our mind. Tedric, for any of the listeners who do not know, was put on an IR today, torn labrum shoulder thingy. I'm not a doctor, but basically he's going to IR and he is out for the season. So he's getting surgery this week. The reason, let's be clear, I'm not celebrating that injury, but the consequences of that injury are that Marquise Blair is absolutely the starter moving forward. Bradley McDougald is back. He has been a key cog of that defense, especially was last year, that has been injured throughout this year off and on. Pete just said today that he's back fully ready to go from those back spasms. So I think looking at the safeties, Marquise Blair is somebody that has really impressed us the past couple of games, is young, is a hitter, really could be the potential, long-term solution at free safety. Pair him with Bradley McDougald coming back, Shaquille Griffin playing out of his mind. That's a pretty good secondary. Trey Flowers is coming back from his neck stinger. The reason, I guess the positive argument that I would make is that the only missing cog here, we can criticize the linebackers a little bit, but like the real missing cog in the defense is the pass rush. And I truly believe, they haven't shown any signs of being good yet. But if they can get even just some pressure, if they can start getting 1 to 2, maybe 3 sacks every single game, I really, really feel like this defense will just sort of everything will fall in line. I really believe that. A strong pass rush makes life easier for the linebackers and makes life easier for the defensive backs, obviously. So my case really is twofold. Tedric Thompson is on IR. Marquise Blair, I think, is going to seize the opportunity if he hasn't already. And I would pray to God that the pass rush finds some level of traction with Jaron Reed, entering his third game back. So my hope would be that the pass rush starts to show some signs of life.
Just a quick side, and then we'll head over to you, Nathan. But I don't know if any of you guys heard Pete's press conference when he was asked about the Tedric to IR injury. Like his story changed like 4 different times. Like he started out and he was like, yeah, he's been toughing it out through, this labrum thing for a while, and he couldn't do it anymore. And then someone asked about, well, why wasn't he on the injury report? And he's like, oh no, this happened last year, and then it just flared up again this week or something like that. And I mean, we'll see if he actually has surgery. I'm honestly like going to be surprised if he has surgery. It seems like the Seahawks kept him around until the trade deadline, planted that like totally hopeful seed with the press that Tedric Thompson, he's got interceptions in back-to-back weeks. You might want to get him. And got no takers. It would have been the most masterful stroke if John Schneider could have gotten someone for Tedric Thompson. And then they're like, okay, we got no takers, dude, you're off. Like, go on IR. We're gonna play the big boys now. So I don't know. That's certainly interesting, and I think that's a great point, Evan. I think the Seahawks had the worst starting safety tandem in the NFL when it was injured Bradley McDougald and Tedric Thompson,
without a doubt.
And I think anything is a step up from that. So, we'll have to see how it goes from there. Nathan, feel free to expand on the quarterback or the other pieces. I mean, looking at teams that have won in the past, that have been contenders in the past, what are things about this team that you think are like some of those teams in the past that can win? Or where do you go and make the case that you've said before, this is a very good team? Like, where would you make the case for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are, well, for me, I guess, I think Jeff and Evan hit it on the head, right? You have a top 5 quarterback, and you can see where this defense is going to improve. It needs to improve, but like, it's not going to be shocking if at the end of the year, it's like, oh, Marquise Blair is good, and Quandre Diggs is, at least capable, and maybe the pass rush kind of comes alive, and that kind of turns things around. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at it, to have optimism there. The other thing is, man, it's single elimination. Just get in the playoffs, and anything can happen. And they're 6-2 right now, and the schedule gets a lot tougher. But they are, they are ahead of schedule, I think, in a lot of ways. And so this is a team that seems very likely at this point to make the playoffs. And once you get in, it's not crazy to say that Russell Wilson's going to catch fire for 4 games or 3 games or whatever, however many games they need, and they could end up, knocking on the door of the Super Bowl, in the Super Bowl, winning the Super Bowl. Like, a lot of this just comes down to luck and injuries and so much other stuff. And so, you have a good quarterback. You can see ways for the defense to improve. You've got the inside track for the playoffs, and then roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, I'm curious what you guys think here. Like, one, you look at the 2 games that they lost, and New Orleans is one of New Orleans. No one would argue that the Saints are a contender. I don't think anyone would argue that. What are they, like 6-1, 7-1 at this point? And they were winning without Teddy Bridgewater, have a very good defense. I still believe that the Seahawks were potentially a couple of plays away from either winning that game or being right in it, all the way to the end. And, you got Al Woods making a really bad, odd rule decision on a field goal that turns into instead of missed field goals, a touchdown. You got the fumble from Chris. So, I mean, there are some things there. And then you got the game against the Ravens, which we didn't talk about on this show because we didn't have it last week, but look, if it's raining and it's at home and you're against that team, I think you get one game, and that's the game we got. And I think if it had been clear skies, I think Russell's historically just been a different player. And I think the Ravens, their vulnerability was in the passing game, not, from a defensive standpoint, not as much from the run. So I think you could make the case that they really should have won both of those games, had things turned around. I also think that, you've got Pete Carroll, who's historically built teams to improve in the second half of the year. And you do have guys like Marquise Blair coming up. You do have Quandre Diggs joining, who I think is probably better than both McDougald and Tedric were. You have the potential for Quandre Diggs. If McDougald and Blair play really well at safety, Quandre Diggs could end up being your nickel back and replace Jamar Taylor. And now all of a sudden you've upgraded 3 important positions, and maybe you don't have to play base all the time. And maybe, the overall defensive scheme starts to make more sense. I think we're seeing Jadeveon Clowney be a real difference maker. He needs some help, but we didn't have Quentin Jefferson suiting up last week. Don't know if he's going to do it this week, but we've still yet to see Jadeveon Clowney, Quentin Jefferson, Jaron Reed, and Ezekiel Ansah all be healthy for the same game. I don't think that's yet happened this season. So potential for that crew to come back. And then I think we've started to see some signs that Trey Flowers is starting to improve. I think we all would probably agree that they missed him last week. I think Akeem King looked not so great in that game. Besides dropping the easy interception, Trey Flowers looked like he started to step forward, and this is going to be a huge game this week to see how Trey Flowers and Shaquille Griffin match up against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So, I think those are some of the things that come up for me as far as potential areas of optimism. I have to admit, I'm kind of got my fingers crossed for Ethan Posick to be available later in the year. I think he can come back for the final 3 games of the season. I don't think Joey Hunt is necessarily the answer. And before we go off this and talk about where maybe we see some reasons to be concerned, let's talk about who we're going to have to go past in the conference, right, to get to the Super Bowl. You start with the 49ers. I think we all believe the 49ers are the best team in the conference, maybe the best team in the NFL, right? I look at the 49ers and I still say, if you can figure out a way to stop their running game on offense, if you can slow them down running the ball, and you have a situation where you've got Jimmy Garoppolo having to beat Russell Wilson in a game like that, I don't think that's completely unrealistic that the Seahawks can win that type of game. I'm kind of curious. Is it the 49ers? Is it another team that you guys think, is really the Seahawks' toughest competition? And how do you think the Seahawks would match up against that competition? Let's start with you, Evan.
Yeah, well, the Seahawks, per Pro Football Focus, are a top 10 run defense. They're ranked 9th overall. So I fully agree on the 49ers matchup. If you can, let me backtrack actually a little bit. All these 49er fans are all hyped on Jimmy Garoppolo because the team is 7-0, 8-0, whatever the heck they are. I'm not even convinced he's good. I'm really not. He's not been super great this year. Like, his reads haven't been super difficult. Kyle Shanahan is making him look like a superstar. It's kind of like what Sean McVay did with Jared Goff last year. I fully agree. If you can stop the run and you make Jimmy Garoppolo really make multiple, progressions through his reads, I'm not sure the 49ers are going to win that game. I mean, you just mentioned a little bit earlier that you think the 49ers are the best team in the NFL. Did you say the NFL?
Yeah.
I completely disagree. I think the Patriots are far better. And I think the difference is at quarterback. I really do. So I would even go further to say, I think I'm more worried about the Saints than I am the Niners.
Well, that's what I was curious about. I think there's a case to be made there. Where are you at on this, Jeff?
I think the Seahawks should be worried about a lot of teams right now based on how they're playing defense, and we'll get into that a little later. But yeah, I would agree that the way to beat the Niners is simple. Like, if you dig deep into Jimmy Garoppolo, it's hard to even find an advanced metric that shows he's playing well. I saw someone tweet today they had to look and they had to find one he's good at getting first downs on third down. That was it. And really the thing with the Niners is just they have a very unique run scheme. And I got after the Seahawks game, I got a chance to sit back and really watch them. I haven't got a chance to really watch a lot of their full games this year. And there's a lot similar to what the Rams were doing last year. They just run the same 5 or 6 plays, and they just design them and use a ton of deception, a ton of motion to create these crazy running angles for their blockers. So they're just a really complicated scheme to run. What Mike Shanahan used to do the same thing. And that's where Kyle's kind of souped up the scheme. And it's just, I worry about what this front will do against those just motions and how they create unique running lanes and how they use 3 running backs. Because that's the plan to beat them is simple. You got to make Jimmy beat you because he hasn't really had to do that in any game this year. And the way they've been running the ball is just a master of scheme. And you've seen what people have done to Seattle's defense and what Kyle Shanahan has done to this defense in the past, and that's what worries me.
Yeah, Nathan, another piece here for the 49ers, just, and then we'll switch gears here, is their schedule the rest of the year. They got the Seahawks at home for Monday Night Football. They've got the Packers, they've got at the Ravens, they've got at the Saints, they've got the Rams, and then they've got at Seattle. It's not the easiest path. And is it possible? I mean, Seattle right now actually controls their own destiny. If they were to sweep the 49ers, as crazy as that sounds right now, Seahawks would have the inside track on the division.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners are. I agree that the Niners are the top competition. I think what Jeff said is right. Like, there should be a lot of teams that worry Seattle. 7 of the top 10 teams, according to Football Outsiders, are NFC teams. 5 of the top 7, right? Seattle is one of those teams, so that's good, right? But the NFC is kind of really good this year, and so I don't know. Like, I think that they're probably right now. We get to see them play twice, so I'm sure my opinion might change on this. But if you had to ask me right now, I'd say that they're clear underdogs to the Niners. But like, I don't know how many teams they're even like slight favorites over, right? I mean, there's a lot of pushes in here and a lot of maybes. And so, like I said, like, it's about getting in the playoffs. It's about rolling the dice and seeing what happens. The downside to that is this is a year where you're going to be rolling up against some good teams. The Niners are just kind of one of those. So I'm of the opinion that Seattle is a very good team, but not a great team, not a clear Super Bowl team. And so I'm like I said, I'm more along the lines with Jeff, where it's just like there's a lot of teams that they need to worry about getting through.
So the last question on this, and then we will switch over. Like, I think we all agree they're not a Super Bowl team right now. So I think, Evan, you maybe said you think the one thing, the question is really, what's the one thing that you believe is most important to turn the Seahawks from the team they are now into a team that truly could contend? You talked about maybe it's pass rush. Is that where you're at, Evan?
It's without a doubt the pass rush in my mind. I think if the pass rush gets some traction, I think this defense completely turns around. I could see this defense being a good defense if the pass rush comes alive.
Jeff, one thing, most important thing to turn this team from a good team to potentially a contending team.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. I think that the pass rush can cover up a lot of flaws. And I know just with them, they're such an easy team to play against right now. If you're an offensive coordinator, you double Clowney. They play very basic schemes. They're not very fast on defense. They have a lot of holes in their zone defenses. Their linebackers aren't fast anymore. So the pass rush is the one thing that kind of makes things difficult because Clowney gets double teamed. We saw it more than any other player in the league. So if they're not getting anything from the other side of their line or interior, they're just an easy team to play against. And you've seen Andy Dalton, you've seen Matt Schaub, you've seen these crap quarterbacks just feast on them. And I know Pete's saying like they're ahead of schedule, and that's bullshit. They're playing like shit. So, again, if the pass rush can get going and you have something that can get going on the other side, because Clowney is still doing pretty good numbers considering how much attention he's getting. If you can force kind of attention elsewhere and just that can help just all the holes in this defense. But I don't know if it's realistic. I don't know if I see it happening. I just don't know if I see who's going to be that guy right now. But I think Evan's right. That's the way to fix a lot of their defensive woes.
I'm the other way around with it. Chicken and egg it a little bit. I think that if this team, like you're saying, there's a lot of holes, right? They're letting bad quarterbacks just shred them up and down the field. And I think that you start to patch up those holes. Like, I think, maybe best case scenario is like you were saying, I think, Brian, like if Blair and McDougald can be your starters and can be good, and that means you can play Diggs at nickel, and then maybe you can get away from this base experiment, which I don't think is working very well. And if you can tighten up that coverage, like I agree that the pass rush hasn't been good, but Clowney like gets close a lot and we see them get close. And so if you tighten up the coverage, does close start to turn into sacks? Right. And there's an analytics bend to this too, right? If you look at the numbers, the analytics tends to say that your coverage drives your defense. And so, I think between those two things, I would if I got to choose, I would pick the coverage, because I think I think pass rush would be a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. I would go my tendency is to definitely try to fix the defense, because it is painful watching that defense right now. We're going to talk about that, I'm sure, in a second. But I'll tell you what, if you wanted me to say what's the thing that would make this most likely to be a contender, I still come back to, I believe that the best single side of the football in the NFL tends to win the championship every year, the one that can't be stopped. And I don't think this defense is going to be that. I think this offense has potential to be that. And for a while, up until a couple weeks ago, they were like second best, third best offense in the NFL by a lot of metrics. Right now, I think they're around third. I want to see this offense be unstoppable. I want to see this offense scoring over 30 points per game. And that sounds like, oh my God, that's a big number. They scored 27 points or more in every game until the Ravens game, after the first week of the season. And they did it again last week, and they should have scored a lot more. So, I really think that we need Russell Wilson to be an MVP. We need him to be getting upwards of high 30s in passing touchdowns this year, if not into the 40s. And I think we've got to see that come together. It may require that the actual rushing offense doesn't suck, which I think it's kind of been pretty bad. And so if they're going to run, getting more efficient at that and getting better yardage out of that to combine with the passing would probably be a good thing. But in any event, whatever it needs to be, I have more belief that the offense can become better or great than I believe that the defense can go from being bad to being even like upper half of the league. So that's kind of where my head's at. Let's switch it around here for a second and talk about, where I think a lot of folks are, which is, hey, this team has not beat anybody really badly other than maybe the Cardinals, and they could have lost almost every game they played this year, including against the Falcons. So what makes this team potentially, maybe they're not going to make the playoffs? Let's talk about that. What are the warning signs for you guys about what the potential downfall is of this team the way it is right now? And Jeff, I know you've been thinking a lot about this on the defensive side. Why don't you talk about that for a second?
Well, I think the biggest thing, I know we were going to talk about what we got wrong later, and that this kind of all fits in together. And it all kind of clicked to me where I was able to sit back and watch the Seahawks play. And then in the next set of games, you got to watch the Niners and the Patriots. And if you kind of look at all three levels of their defense, and like if you do some team building exercises, you can learn a lot of things about why the Seahawks are actually kind of a poorly built defense in a lot of areas. So we'll start on the defensive line quickly. And you look at the defensive line, they get Clowney at the last second. Last year, Frank Clark pretty much carried that whole unit. They didn't really have a second edge rusher. And they sign Ansah. So on paper, Ansah and Clowney looks pretty good. We were all pretty hyped about it. I definitely a lot of teams do, and fans do this for sure, but even teams do this all the time, is they look at past production and they think that is going to be future success. And in football, players fall off a cliff very quickly. It's not like baseball or basketball where there's like a steady decline. People's bodies break down. You see the difference in how McDougal played, for example. Look at Lofa Tatupu, who's a Seahawk. You saw what happened with him. His body just wasn't built for the rigors of the NFL. Ziggy Ansah is a guy that they got at a discounted rate. They got him after the comp pick date because he had shoulder surgery. He was an explosive first step guy, like highly rated on PFF. But realistically, you have to know, like, he was a pretty big risk entering the year. So from a roster building standpoint, balancing risk and reward is a huge job of a GM, especially on a team that has new pass rushers, lost their best pass rusher. So a lot of teams do is this exercise called like the Jenga exercise. If you take one player out of the defense, like playing that board game Jenga, what happens to the position? And if you look, for example, just using an example of that exercise, like when you took Brandon Browner out of the defense in 2013, what happened? Byron Maxwell came in. Jeremy Lane came in. They were fine. They were built to sustain. If you look at the Niners on Sunday, for example, their good cornerback, Akello Weatherspoon, he hasn't played for a bit, but they have this new cornerback. Forget his name for a second. It's who is it? Emmanuel Mosley. That guy looks like he comes in and the defense operates fine. So if with Seattle you take Ansah out, what happens? You have LJ Collier, Rasheem Green, Brandon Jackson. And for the most part, those are essentially zeros as pass rushers. So this defense, and Nathan mentioned this a lot. I was thinking about it the other day. He mentioned this last year, like how one injury could just tear apart the whole team. And that's just he talked about that last year when we weren't sure what the 2018 team would be like. And that's actually an exercise that teams do use. And the Seahawks just were not prepared for this. I don't know if it was losing Jacob Martin. I don't know if they expected Rasheem Green to take a bigger step forward. But you had to expect to an extent that there was a possibility that Ansah would bust. Like, I don't think you would expect it to be this level. Like, he's in the Eddie Lacy free agency category right now. And they don't have, they've essentially, like, Greens look good at times, but they have essentially 3 zeros playing in that spot. So really that spot was kind of set up as like, if everything didn't go right, they were set up to fail. Defensive tackle is actually a pretty well-built group, if you think about it. Jaron Reed was suspended. They signed Al Woods. They figured that hole a little bit. Poona Ford's been slowed down by injury. He hasn't played as well as we would have thought. But they had the balance with Quinton Jefferson. They're built okay. The biggest area, like, you look at is now the linebackers. And a lot of teams do this. When I said before, they think pass production will equal future success. And that doesn't happen in football. So you look at the linebackers, and we all thought, and rightfully so did the Seahawks, we thought this group would be the best linebacking core, or one of the best linebacking cores in the league. And what teams tend to do is when they're trying to build a team, you want a bunch of guys who play. You want to have a bunch of guys who are either near their first contract where they're peaking athletically. And we've talked about that a lot over the years of how you want guys on first contracts. You want hungry guys. You want young guys. When the Seahawks were great, they had a ton of guys on first contract, ton of guys trying to get paid. Last year, you had Clark doing that. He had the best season of his career. And this year, on paper, Clark, Wagner, Wright, Kendricks, that looks like a stud group. But in 2019, I'm not sure how good that group is. And I think that was the mistake the Seahawks made. And I think that explains the Cody Barton pick a little more. That was kind of a head scratcher for a lot of people up front. And they actually balanced their risk a little bit. But the guys who are actually playing every game, Kendricks before this week has had a pretty bad season. He's out of position. He's playing a new position. KJ Wright in 2019, I don't know if he's even a good player, even an above average player anymore. He's slow. And Bobby Wagner, it's kind of hard to explain what's going on with him. We can probably save that for another segment, but he hasn't been making, like, you saw him hit that blitz. You saw him break up the 2-point, but most of the year, he hasn't been this flash player. Like last year, he played out of his mind. So if you look at the linebacking core as a whole, those 3 guys who are close to 30, they're not young and hungry. They're not peaking athletically. That's not a great build group for a team that plays a ton of zone defense. And for the way they run this scheme, those 3 on paper, like, we kind of miss this. They look good by names, but as a group, that's not great. Like, if you look at the Niners, for example, they have Quan Alexander and they have Fred Warner. Those guys are peaking athletically. They're fast. They play hard to the ball. They have a ton of juice. There's just a big difference in watching how open the players are at the second level of their defense. And the secondary is actually starting to come around now that Blair's playing, but one weak link can break apart a whole defense. If you remember the Super Bowl a couple years ago, Bill Belichick, they benched Malcolm Butler and they had a cornerback in there who just wasn't good enough. Their whole defense, they got picked apart by Nick Foles. Like, one weak link could blow the whole defense. And Tedric Thompson, now we'll see with him, without him. That's the hole in the secondary. And they botched the nickel corner position. They went from having one of the best guys in the league. So if you look at all 3 levels, there's failures in building and failures in coaching and putting these guys in a scheme they probably can't execute. Sorry, that was my rant. I've been thinking about that for like 4 days.
I'm glad you got it off your chest. I don't know that there's much that I'd argue with on that. I am curious. Evan, you've made a lot of friends on Twitter over the years. I know that you feel like this team has kind of beat the happiness out of you. So what is it? What is it about this team that's giving you the most acid reflux, man? While you're out?
So I think it's important to set the context. Is like, I'm a naturally optimistic guy. I really am. Like I'm a glass half full type of guy. Like I always believe the best is yet to come. But there's something about the Seahawks. It's okay. Let me be clear. It's not that they struggle. It's not that the Seahawks struggle. It's that the Seahawks struggle with the same issues consistently, repeatably. And it makes me want to bang my head against a wall. It's like fixable things. And I could name a million different things, from like fourth down decision making, relying too much on Jason Myers, not starting Jamarco Jones, third down decisions to run it on 3rd and 8. Like there's things I could go off about that are just, they have a long history of doing. Pete's game management decisions. Like I said, it's not that they struggle. Everybody struggles. Every team has flaws. Every coach has flaws. But it feels like we keep talking about the same struggles, the same flaws, when I feel like some of these things are fixable. So it's just exhausting. And honestly, it's a me problem. Like I'm way too emotionally invested into the Seahawks. So this is a me issue. I want to be very clear. It just feels like we talk about the same issues every single week. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that a lot of those were different when the Seahawks were really good. And I think what's kind of, maybe this has always been the case that folks have been making, but I think it's becoming a little clear. And I would say that it's meandered a little bit to get to this point. But I think what it really is that some of the flaws in how Pete is as a coach, like some of the game management stuff, number of the things, I won't go through them all. You listed a bunch. They can be okay if he's got a solid defense. And we've talked about like a great defense. I don't even know if he needs a great defense, but if he's got a really bad defense, which I think right now by almost any measure, this Seahawks defense is really bad. Like one of the worst defenses in the NFL.
Is it the worst defense Pete Carroll has ever had with the Seahawks? I think so.
Well, 2010 was pretty bad.
They're 30th in yards per play, which is one of the stats that gamblers love.
Yeah.
Only behind them is Dolphins and Bengals, both winless.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really bad. And in that situation, a lot of this other stuff just gets exacerbated, right? It's accentuated and amplified. So I think that's part of the issue. I think where I've always gotten hung up before is this notion of Pete's a bad coach. I don't think Pete's a bad coach. I think that he is used to having a defense that he can at least have some reliance on. I don't think he needs the 2013 Seahawks defense to build a contending team, but I don't know that he can do it with a defense like this. Whereas, Bill Belichick, when he had, as Tom Brady, did get to the Super Bowl with a like 32nd ranked defense in certain categories, and like bottom like 29, 30, like multiple times they got to the Super Bowl with a really poorly ranked defense. I don't know that Pete could do that. I'm not sure.
Well, and Brian, just to follow up on that thought real quick, the issue is I feel like Pete Carroll plays like he coaches, he makes game management decisions like he has a top 10 defense, a top 5.
Well, I think that moves the conversation forward, at least in my mind. And like, maybe I just wasn't hearing it, but like when we talk about how bad of a choice it is to punt from your opponent's, 43-yard line,
totally
on 4th and 5.
They did that with the Legion of Boom, though. That's right, the thing. Like that's not a new issue.
That's not the worst decision if you feel like your defense is going to at least limit a little bit of what your opponents are capable of doing.
Exactly.
I think statistically in almost any situation, it's considered a bad idea. So I get that, but I'm just saying, I think that's what's going on here a little bit more is just the calculus of what he has and what he's working with is much more risky right now. I'm sure.
I think it's partly his optimistic nature. Like, I truly believe that. I think Pete is believing like every day, like his defense tomorrow is going to turn a major corner. I don't think that mindset is bad. but I think you also need to be a little bit more realistic about it in game, I guess.
Well, I think you just need to be able to say what he tends to be actually really good at is recognizing what players' individual strengths are. I mean, he's always been able to say this player can do this well. The rest of the league thinks he sucks, but I'm going to put him in a position where he can do something really well. Cam Chancellor, Brandon Browner, there's guys that may not have been as great in certain systems, but he put some of those guys in positions where they just shine. Byron Maxwell. I mean, people might say Cam Chancellor's a bad example, but I just think there's a lot of people that passed over him because they just didn't think a guy that was like a linebacker could play safety in the NFL. He's not doing that with his team. Forget the individuals. He's not saying this is where this team is fantastic. I'm going to lean into that, right? And I'm going to really rely on it and build around it. And I think that's where a lot of folks are frustrated about the passing stuff. And last year, part of my frustration is with those folks is they did have a real strength, and it was around running as well. So I do think that was a really good rushing team last year. I don't think it's a good rushing team this year. So that's another part of it where he usually likes to have a good running team to go with a good defense. And I don't think he has either of them this year. Nathan, I see the faces. I see him. Come on.
Their running game was ranked better than I thought it was last year, but their passing game was still far and away the better part of their offense.
I'll take the minor V for victory on that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, where are you most pessimistic about this team, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean it's the defense and it's the coaching. Again, if you are a good, not great team, if you're a playoff team, not a Super Bowl team, and you're just hoping to roll the dice, you can't make the margin isn't there to throw away, right? And Pete is doing that every single game. Derek on Twitter, I should find his handle or whatever. He's a great follow. He showed the cumulative win probability added across the teams by fourth down decisions, and almost every team except Seattle is positive, and Seattle is significantly negative. So maybe this defense, like I said, there's ways that you can see them getting better, and Russ is amazing, and he can create magic that gives you margin that you shouldn't have. But to Evan's point, we see the same mistakes every week, and they're correctable, and they're not going to correct them. And I don't think this is going to keep them from making the playoffs, but I think it could cost them a playoff game. A lot like what we saw last year with the Dallas game, and how that was different. They got stubborn with the game plan, but it's still the same thing where Pete wants to play. Pete coaches like he has a team he does not have.
Yeah. It's just jumping in. Here's where I am overall on these things. I think that by nature of what you and Evan and I are just saying, I think Jeff agrees too. If the fourth down play calls, and overall game strategy calls are the thing that is a big issue, or one of the big issues, I think that what that really tells you is they're just not that good of a team right now. They're just not that good. There's no team that's man, they would have been Super Bowl contenders if they could have just, made the right fourth down play calls or game management calls. Definitely, I think we're saying they'd have a better chance to win. They'd be in a better position to win, and it could be meaningfully different. But if you just look at the Seahawks position for position, talent for talent against some of these other teams, I'm having trouble seeing it right now. I don't see the Seahawks walking into anyone's stadium and intimidating them. I think that game against the 49ers in a couple weeks, I'm bracing for impact, guys. I got plenty of colleagues down in San Francisco are let's go to the Monday night game. And I'm no, I don't want to go to that game. So
where do you have them? Are they top 10 to you? Top 15, 20?
I haven't thought about it in that regard. I kind of think about it as, do I believe this team could stand up to scrutiny against a really top a 49ers, a Saints, a Patriots, maybe even a Vikings, depending on where that game's played. And I don't know that I feel like they can. I have trust in Russell in any situation to like make something interesting happen. But look, I think the 49ers are a powerhouse. I disagree with Evan. I think they're better than the Patriots. I do. I think like across the board, other than quarterback, which is a super important position. By the way, Tom Brady's numbers are not great this year, and that offensive line is not great this year for the Patriots. So, I think So
they might not have to play the Niners in the playoffs, though.
They might not.
No.
Yeah. So I guess if the Seahawks are not going to have a home playoff game, if they're not going to win the division, which I think is a long shot at this point, then I just don't think the Seahawks are going to have much to say in the playoffs. So even though they're undefeated on the road, so that's kind of, I feel like I walked away from the Ravens game with that point of view, where it was like, you know what? I love the Seahawks. I'm obsess about the Seahawks. I always will. I don't think they're that good right now. I think they're okay. I think they very likely could win 10 to 11 games. I think they could also go, 9-7 and miss the playoffs. It wouldn't shock me.
I think that's what makes all the coaching stuff so frustrating, because self-evaluating, self-scouting is such an important job of a coaching staff. And really, to add on to what these guys are saying, I think they need to give Russell more opportunities. I think just watching other quarterbacks and the success play action has, and they don't let him do enough. And I think for this team, with the schedule about to pick up and the quality of opponents picking up, giving him like 20 passes a game, that's just not good enough. This team has a clear strength, and they just need to play to it.
I mean, yeah, like I think that is true, and I think that, Brian, you're right. Like, they're not a clear Super Bowl favorite, but I don't think needing to maximize around the edges means that they're not capable of winning the Super Bowl or capable of winning playoff games. Like, they're still a good team. And if you go back over the last few years, last year, New England was the 7th best team by DVOA. They beat Kansas City, number 1 in DVOA in the AFC Championship game, and then they beat the Rams, number 2 in DVOA in the Super Bowl, right? You go back the year before that, if I can make Football Outsiders work for me, you had Philly with 5th, right? You go before that in 2016. I think 2016 is the exception here. You had New England and Atlanta; they were 1 and 3. But in 2015, Seattle was number 1 overall, right? And they didn't even make the NFC Championship game. Denver with 8th, and they beat the 4th. Carolina was 4th. So you don't yes, they are not the odds-on favorite to win a Super Bowl, but they don't have to be, right? It's single elimination. It's not a 3-game series or a 7-game series, or it's not a tournament of 64 teams. It's like 3 or 4 games. That's all.
I love optimistic, Nathan.
I'm just saying, I don't even know it's optimistic. I just look, it's weird.
Glass half full, Nathan. Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely am not saying, and I believed all the things I said at the beginning about why that they could be contenders. Like there is a percentage chance that could happen. I think it's a long shot. I think it's a big long shot at this point. And I will say, I think I'm concerned right now, guys, that the Will Dissly injury is way bigger than anyone realizes. I don't think the offense has looked as good the last 2 weeks since he's been out. And, we'll see Ed Dixon come back, and I think he'll help. But I think Will Dissly, I think in maybe 5-10 years, we'll look back and be like, yeah, he's like Jason Witten. And when you lose a guy like that, it's a really big deal. Like he was a great blocker and he was a great receiver. And I think they're still adjusting to that. You're going to say
real
something?
Quick. Yeah, real quick on Super Bowl aspirations. This is a weird question, but do the Seahawks have a better chance of making the Super Bowl via the road versus playing at home? Serious question.
It's not it's not crazy. It depends on where. I mean, Minnesota.
Say it's all dome. Well, that's a dome now, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a good question. I think Russell Wilson is definitely better off in on turf and in a climatized environment.
100% agree. He'd make a phenomenal Arizona Cardinal. Come on down, Russell.
Don't you do that, man. I'm going to make you start wearing that visor upside down and backwards and bleach those tips, man. All right. Hey, we only got a few minutes left because I know Evan and Nathan's got to jet at around 9. So let's talk quickly about this game coming up this weekend. We've got the Seahawks playing against Bruce Arians, Jameis Winston, and the Bucs. Given that you guys got to go quickly, Evan, starting with you, how do you feel about this game? What's your expectation for how it ends?
Oh, God. I hate to be pessimistic, but here I am. I'm really worried about this game, and I'll tell you why. The Bucs have a really good run defense, like top 3 run defense in multiple advanced metrics. Top what?
The top one.
Oh, the top 1. Even better. Can't wait. They have the best run defense in the NFL. If the Seahawks have a game plan that is focused on establishing the run, I'm a little bit worried that that's not going to work out. They have a very bad passing defense. It would be wise to let Russell Wilson throw the football a lot this game. I think just naturally looking at the Seahawks' strengths, they're not a good run blocking unit. They're like end of the top 20. So I think that matchup is concerning there. I think when it comes to our secondary in our pass rush, I think our secondary is capable of holding up against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but and people are worried. People are saying like, oh, Winston's going to throw interceptions, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Winston is not afraid to throw the deep ball, and he takes risks. And if our pass rush cannot get to him, Winston is going to have a day.
Did we just hear Mike Evans slander on the podcast? What was that? Can we rewind on that?
Did I slander him?
You think that the Seahawks secondary this is like the 24th ranked defense, and you're like, I'm not worried about Mike Evans.
Shaquille Griffin, no problem. Shaquille Griffin, no problem. What?
This is that thing that we do where a player has a nice year and suddenly he's Richard Sherman. Like, remember the time that Justin Britt was a Pro Bowl alternate and everyone's like, he's the best center in the league, and now they're like, he's fucking up.
You did not just compare Shaquille Griffin's career trajectory to Justin Britt, did you?
I mean, career trajectory, no, but like,
Shaquille Griffin is good. Justin Britt is not. End of story.
I gotta go dig up some old Justin. You delete all your old tweets, so I can't do it. But you had some Justin Britt takes.
Yeah. Yes, I did. They were bad, but to answer your question, Brian, I think it's about our pass rush getting to Winston and having a game plan that lets Russell Wilson throw the football.
So who wins this game?
Seahawks by 3.
Oh, you wuss! All right, Nathan.
Yeah, I'm terrified about this game too. I think I don't know if there's a good reason for us all to be scarred by the Bucs, but I think we all are for some reason. I mean, what was it like 3 years ago when Britt was hurt and they scored like 5 points or something like that, right? So that's a fun comparison to make. But I'll go with like a 17-14 Seahawks win. I don't know.
That is one of the most tepid takes of all time. So yeah, I think as we bid adieu to Evan and Nathan, I will just say, look, I think they hit it on the fact that Jameis Winston is a guy that is just as likely to throw 5 touchdowns as he is to throw 5 picks, and he might do it in the same game and fumble twice. I think I wrote it today that like he's a guy that will fumble, he will throw interceptions, he will fumble and then throw an interception on the same play. Like he's an idiot. Like he makes some really, really dumb decisions. And then he's like fearless. He will just keep throwing. He has no conscience about it, and he'll just all of a sudden pile up a ton of yards. And the Seahawks have a terrible defense and a terrible secondary so far this year. So I think the Bucs have a lot of reason to score a lot. Bruce Arians has a lot of confidence about how to play against Pete Carroll, especially in Seattle. And I think if the Seahawks do what they normally do and try to stick with the run, I think the Seahawks are in trouble in this game. I really do. If the Seahawks lean on Russell Wilson, I think they win. So it's going to be interesting to see if the coaching staff can really lean into what their strengths are. I'm curious, Jeff, where you're at on this game.
Yeah, you guys covered most of my points, and I wrote a message to you guys in the group thread like 2-3 weeks ago. Out of the blue, you guys were probably confused at the time. I just wrote that this Bucs game scared me, and it's the exact reasons you guys covered. I've been watching them all year. I own one of their players in fantasy, so I just usually when the early set's on, I've been watching them a little more than I probably should. And yeah, their strengths are very clear, and it reminds me of that Dallas game last year where everything was on the table. It was a very obvious game plan. We had Warren Sharp on. Didn't take much to figure out, and they still did the same thing. And the Bucs are really good against the run. They have Sue and Vita Vea in the middle. We have Joey Hunt. It's just as much of a mismatch as you can get. So if they don't try to air it out and I would have liked to see someone ask Pete today, how do you stay balanced when there's clearly one obvious flaw in another team's opponent? If you talk to Shoddy tomorrow, if anyone's listening, please ask him that. But I think if they play the game smart and try to attack them through the air, I think they'll win. And I think if they be stubborn and try to establish the run and run on 3rd and 3 and run on 3rd and 6 in a game-winning situation, I think they're going to lose. And I have no harm in saying that. I think if Jameis Winston is the kind of guy, he throws into double and triple coverage. So if the Seahawks aren't sticky with their coverages, he could have a big day.
Yeah, I'm really going to be interested in watching Marquise Blair in this game. Marquise Blair and Bradley McDougall. Those two, and I would throw in Trey Flowers. I'm really interested to see how those guys play in this game. They're definitely going to get opportunities. And part of me just feels like McDougall and Blair it can be a significant upgrade over what we've seen at the safety position. And Blair played pretty damn well in this last game. I know that there's probably some coverage breakdowns, and Pete is still being very measured in his comments even today about Marquise Blair and making sure to point out every time that he's got a lot to learn and he's not assignment correct and all those kinds of things. But he made some great tackles that I've never seen Tedric make. I mean, closing down guys, really showing his speed that Tedric did not have. Turning what could have been 10 or 15 yard plays into 3-yard plays. That tackle on, I think, the screen play, I think you remember, was a great tackle. The tackle toward the end of the game where he kept the guy down in bounds. I mean, those are difference-making plays. He forced a fumble that I think we all believe maybe wasn't a fumble, but still, I mean, you've got a guy that can maybe make some impact now. And if Bradley McDougall can just be, he doesn't have to be who he was last year, but if he can be an average starting safety, I'm interested in how that looks. And I don't think we're going to get Quandre Diggs yet this week. I think we're going to have to wait till the 49ers game, but I am really curious. This is going to be a game where we're going to learn a lot about whether the secondary has upside this year.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic call out. And I was thinking about Blair pretty much the whole show, and I probably spoke too much on the other issue, but I agree with you. I thought Blair was probably the most optimistic part of that game on Sunday because this defense, and I talked about the personnel issues earlier, they don't have a lot of juice. And what I mean by juice is just guys who just are disruptors. They bring energy to the defense. If you watch the Seahawks play, other than Clowney, and Wagner hasn't played like that, and Griffin at times, they don't have guys who can just fire up a sideline. The way the way Blair hits, it's just, you saw that hit he had on Calvin Ridley. I don't know how he stayed in that game, but that was a clean shoulder-to-shoulder hit. That was great defense. And having a guy like that can change the entire unit. You saw what Cam did, where teams were scared to throw over the middle. And he's not going to be Cam, obviously, but that changes a lot. Going from Tedric Thompson to him, and Pete is being a little reserved in his praise. Maybe that's something internally, but if you listen to Brock talk or you listen to Jim Nagy on Twitter, these guys are great football evaluators, and their takeaways were the same thing. Blair is a game changer for them, and they really haven't had any on defense other than Clowney and probably Griffin this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I mean, I just hope, look, Jeff, there's nothing I like less than having a Seahawks team that has a bad defense. I mean,
it sucks.
I love winning and all that's good, but it took the life out of me Sunday just watching them crap the bed, defensively and give up over 500 yards to that Falcons team with Matt Schaub out there throwing with plenty of time. So I really hope we can see the Seahawks defense find a little bit of footing. I don't need them to be great, but if I could pick one realistic thing, it would be just get good at stopping the run.
Yeah.
Just like at least make teams one-dimensional and get into situations where you have some third and longs to potentially take advantage of. But right now, I think the Seahawks are not good at stopping the run. They're not good at stopping the pass. They're not good at rushing the passer, and they're not that great at coverage. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was saying before.
You got to start somewhere. Pick something to be great at and, let the other things come along. I think run defense, to me, with Poona Ford, with Al Woods, with Jaron Reed, with Jadeveon Clowney, with Bobby Wagner, I think they've got what they need, even at the level that those guys are playing right now, to be a very good run defense.
Mm-hmm.
Start there, and then, build out from that. So we'll see how it goes. I want to thank everybody for joining, as always. It's been a great week catching up. Thank you to Russian Bot again for your contribution in chat. Always appreciate you, dude. You take care of us, and we try to take care of you. If you haven't already, we every year we donate to Ben's fund, and we've donated over $120,000 over the course of time to Ben's fund. We want to, our goal is to donate $20,000 at least every year. And, we really depend on all of you to help that happen. So if you haven't already, please sign up over at patreon.com/hawkblogger and get signed up there. All different ways you can join. You can be a sponsor. If you know someone that should be a sponsor and wants to get added to the show as a sponsor, be happy to talk about them. We've got some great sponsors already. If you haven't been to Burger Master lately, please go have a burger, have a shake, tell us about it, give us a shout, and give Burger Master a shout on Twitter. John Hurlbutt and the folks at Altitude Homes can help you with a bunch of stuff on the real estate side. And then obviously Blake over at Manifest Fit, great personal trainer. He's been working with my wife, Rachel, online, can do wherever you are, whatever the weather's like, can help tailor a specific fitness routine for you. And dude, I am eating right now in all sorts of bad ways. So I probably really need to get my fitness game going. I'm sure other people are in the same. So please, support our sponsors, become a sponsor. I'm okay if you become a sponsor, sign up for sponsorship, and you just want us to record a spot where we make fun of Evan. That's totally fine. We can do that. We can do all sorts of things. If you want to talk about how the run game's great or how you don't like Pete Carroll, we can do all sorts of fun things. So please join up at patreon.com. Otherwise, give us a like, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify or Apple iTunes, Google Play. Or just leave a nice comment, leave a nice review, give it a 5-star review, please. We need 5-star reviews. If you have less than 5 stars, let us know before you go, and we'll hopefully change that around. But otherwise, just thanks all you for being fans of the show and sticking around. It's always great to have you there. And for now, we'll leave it at that and just say go Hawks. Have a great weekend.